The battles between the Sioux Nation and the U.S. Army were among the most significant and tragic conflicts in American history, stretching across several decades of the 19th century. These confrontations were deeply rooted in the westward expansion of settlers, driven by government policies that prioritized territorial acquisition at the expense of Native American lands and ways of life. The Sioux, a powerful confederation of Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota tribes, thrived on the Great Plains, living in harmony with the environment and relying on buffalo hunting as the foundation of their economy, spirituality, and culture. However, the arrival of settlers and the government's expansionist agenda disrupted this balance, leading to a series of violent clashes. Tensions began to rise in the mid-19th century, particularly after the California Gold Rush of 1848, which brought waves of settlers into the West. The 1862 Homestead Act encouraged even more settlers to occupy Sioux territories, while the construction of railroads carved through the heart of native lands. One of the most egregious provocations came in 1874 when gold was discovered in the Black Hills of South Dakota, a region sacred to the Sioux as part of the Great Sioux Reservation guaranteed to them under the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie. The influx of miners and settlers into this sacred area fueled outrage among the Sioux and became a flashpoint for conflict. The first major clash occurred during the Dakota War of 1862, also known as the Sioux Uprising. This war erupted in Minnesota when the Dakota Sioux, facing starvation due to the U.S. government's failure to deliver promised annuities and the depletion of their hunting grounds, attacked settlers and military outposts. Over the course of the conflict, hundreds of settlers and soldiers were killed, and thousands fled the region in fear. The uprising was brutally suppressed, culminating in the capture of hundreds of Sioux. 38 men were hanged in Mankato, Minnesota, in the largest mass execution in U.S. history, while the surviving Dakota Sioux were forcibly removed to reservations in the West. The following years saw continued hostilities, including Red Cloud's War from 1866 to 1868. This conflict was sparked by the U.S. Army's construction of forts along the Bozeman Trail, a key route to the Montana goldfields that crossed through Sioux hunting grounds in Wyoming and Montana. Under the leadership of Red Cloud, the Sioux waged a relentless campaign of resistance. The conflict reached its climax in the Fetterman Massacre of 1866, when a group of 81 U.S. soldiers under Captain William Fetterman was lured into an ambush by Sioux warriors, including the young and brilliant tactician Crazy Horse. The massacre was a resounding victory for the Sioux and forced the U.S. government to negotiate. The resulting Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1868 temporarily secured the Powder River country for the Sioux and required the abandonment of U.S. forts in the region. The most famous and dramatic clash between the Sioux and the U.S. Army occurred during the Great Sioux War of 1876 to 1877, a direct consequence of the government's violation of the 1868 treaty after gold was discovered in the Black Hills. The Sioux, joined by their Cheyenne allies, resisted efforts to confine them to reservations. The conflict reached its apex at the Battle of the Little Bighorn in June 1876. Led by Sitting Bull, whose visions had foretold victory, and Crazy Horse, who commanded the warriors in battle, the Sioux and Cheyenne forces decisively defeated the 7th Cavalry under Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer. Custer, along with more than 250 soldiers, was killed in what became known as Custer's Last Stand. The battle was a remarkable victory for the Sioux, but it also galvanized public opinion in the United States, leading to a massive military response. Over the following year, the Sioux and their allies were relentlessly pursued, their villages destroyed, and their people forced to surrender due to starvation and exhaustion. The final and most heartbreaking chapter in the Sioux-U.S. conflicts came in December 1890 at Wounded Knee Creek in South Dakota. By this time, the Sioux had been confined to reservations, where they faced dire conditions, including poverty, hunger, and disease. The Ghost Dance movement, a spiritual revival that spread among many native tribes, gave the Sioux hope that their lands and way of life would be restored. Alarmed by the movement, U.S. authorities sought to suppress it. On December 29, as U.S. soldiers attempted to disarm a group of Sioux near Wounded Knee, a scuffle broke out, and a shot was fired, though it remains unclear by whom. This triggered a massacre, with U.S. troops opening fire on the largely unarmed Sioux, killing around 300 men, women, and children. The massacre at Wounded Knee marked the end of the Indian Wars and stands as a symbol of the devastating consequences of U.S. expansionist policies. In the aftermath of these conflicts, the Sioux people endured immense suffering. Forced onto reservations, they faced not only the loss of their lands but also the suppression of their culture, spiritual practices, and language. The near extermination of the buffalo, orchestrated by settlers and the U.S. government, further devastated their way of life. Despite these challenges, the Sioux have persevered, maintaining their cultural identity and continuing to fight for their rights and recognition. Today, the history of the Sioux-U.S. conflicts serves as a poignant reminder of the resilience of the Sioux people and the profound costs of American expansionism.